So welcome everybody to the latest Tivian customer webinar today. We are looking today at EFS APIs, and we're going to provide you an overview of what they can do and how they can be used. As always, I'm here, but for those joining for the first time, my name is Jay Hartley and I'm the Customer Success Manager here for the UK. And I'm joined by an expert in handling APIs and all other things technical. Alex, please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. I've been in the company now almost 8 years, across a wide range of technical roles. Looking forward to talking about APIs today.
Thank you, Alex. So our agenda today looks like this. Starting off, we're going to clarify what we mean by an API. We're then going to take a look at why you should consider using them. We're going to look at the main benefits they bring and how much flexibility they can offer you. I'll then hand over to Alex, who's going to provide us with an overview of the APIs available through EFS, before he's then going to move on to cover the technical process of setting up a direct API integration. Today, as I'm joined by a technical expert, we will go into a reasonable amount or reasonable level of technical detail about the APIs. So if you want any clarification on specific points, don't be afraid to add those via the webinar panel, and we can make use of Alex's expertise. Okay, so first of all, what do we mean by an API? So the term API can mean different things to different people. What we're going to do now is just set the scene and explain what we here at Tivian mean by the term API, so that it helps to frame your understanding and how you can use them. So APIs, as far as we're concerned, are a web interface that enable two systems to talk to each other. This is a supported process, and it's supported by secure data transfer protocols to ensure that the data is protected at all times, as it is imported into or exported from EFS. Typically, these systems, these external systems, would be either yours or your customer's CRM or HR systems. So why should you use EFS APIs? So as we framed this, the main thing is that they can do is they'll actually be able to save you time. The beauty of the APIs is they can take data from a CRM or an HR system and pass it to EFS, which means that you not have to spend time taking that data out of the system, working through and then passing it in. This is particularly important where you are dealing with data that you might be passing on a regular basis. And what you can do is you can work with relevant teams in your business to actually schedule those data transfer processes, so that it could be either sent on a particular time of day or week to EFS to populate the panel or populate survey information. Similarly, if you want to take data out of the system, then you can also schedule those. So again, if there's things that you're doing on a regular basis with data, you should consider the APIs, because they might be a route to creating efficiencies within your business. The other thing that they can do is they can be used to create event-driven processes. I'm going to take a look at a couple of these in a second, but what do we mean by event-driven process? Well, these are things that might happen off the back of an action. So as a typical EFS user, you might be generating surveys that are going out to either employees, customers, or panelists, and those might be things that you're doing on a kind of on a per group basis. So on a particular day, you're going to go in and send something out. However, sometimes you might have an event-driven process, such as in a customer world, a purchase, and it might be off the back of the purchase you want to then add that person into a survey, and the APIs can help you do that. So I'm just going to have a quick look at what a customer experience process might look like. And you can see there's a series of steps, and at various points in here, you could add an API from the relevant system into EFS. So you start off with your customer database, and you look at measuring potentially some feedback across the customer journey. So it might be that in store, they might make a purchase or something like that. And off the back of that, it might be that you are then looking to trigger something. So you might capture their information at point of sale, and then off the back of that, you might be sending them a survey. And the API can help trigger that piece of information. Similarly, it might be that you're actually using some kind of website for the purchase. And again, if something happens, you can even do some tracking and do some clever stuff whereby you're then sending them a survey based on activity they carry out on that website, whether that be a purchase or they're filling in a registration form for your newsletter or something like that. So all of these things, when joined up, can then make sure that you're actually dealing with those in real time using the APIs. The benefit of doing something like that is it means that if you're then doing dashboarding, again, that information is being sent, pushed through into EFS. And if you're using our dashboarding, then obviously you can have that update in real time. However, if you are looking at a process that is hosted, the reporting is hosted elsewhere, you could then use one of the things that we're going to show you later to take data from EFS and push it into that system. Again, that might be something you're doing on a regular basis and you know, on a regular scheduled basis, and it helps to keep data live. Now, just going to have a very quick look at what that might look from an employee perspective. So again, the same process would apply. You'd have an HR system or potentially a recruitment system. And what you do is you set up some kind of scheduled process, and it might be that you're passing information after an interview, say. So an employee or a potential employee has been interviewed, and you want to get some feedback on how they felt the interview went, not necessarily from a personal perspective, but how the process went. And again, you might have that feed into EFS and then push out a survey to them. And then obviously once you've actually onboarded the individual, there's series of points that you might be looking to get feedback from them. So it might be after a very short period, after their first week, you might look to get some information from them. And again, if you've got your HR system set up to pass that information through to EFS, then that can then trigger out a survey. Similarly, after 3 and 6 months, we typically see them being used. And you could even go as far as the complete journey if you happen to have an employee exiting the business. Again, once you know that, you can then be sending them the survey. And again, all of that feedback goes through a series of projects and can be fed into some live dashboards. So I hope you see the benefit that they can bring you. I'm now going to pass over to Alex, and he's going to look at the overview of EFS APIs and then kind of a technical integration. So please do add questions as we go along.
Right, yeah, so time for the more fun stuff, in my own personal opinion, of course. So we have over 200 different API methods, different services, if you will, and we have all kinds of functionality covering a lot of what EFS does, from adding, deleting, editing participants, importing, exporting survey data, obtaining, creating samples, sending emails out. There's a lot of different things you can do. Of course, if you see a particular requirement that you want to do and you don't see a relevant service to match it, then please do get in touch with us, and that's something we can also help with potentially as well. In terms of how they work, for the technical people, we fit with all the usual industry standards. Our services are RESTful, and then work also with SOAP and JSON and PHP serialized. In terms of authentication, we do accept tokens and account name and password. That would be your EFS login, account name and password. But actually what we say to do to everybody now is we recommend that you use tokens. So a token is generated by us or by our support team and associated to an EFS login account, which can be your own, of course, if you want, or of course you could create a dedicated account if you want to separate the rights and the usage, which is probably the best practice, because you might not want to give the service or the rights that your personal account has, for example. So good practice can be to separate them. But if you want to generate a token and you have the service layer module enabled on your installation, then you could just contact our support team and they can provide that token for you. If you don't have the service layer module enabled, also please get in touch with either your account manager or our support team, and they will help you with the steps required there. So we're going to look at a kind of a specific example, and I'm kind of demonstrate a few services that help put this together. So first, you want to get a list of surveys in this particular example into your system, a customer system, and we have a method for that called surveys_surveys_get_list. This particular service I can show you in our documentation right now is here. We will obviously provide the links to all the documentation afterwards, so don't worry about that. But the documentation is fairly new and up to date, and shows clearly what methods to use and how to call that service. This particular service is a GET service, so that means you can basically call it from a web browser with the right URL. So as we can see up here, it's surveys, surveys is all you need. So put that into context, you have your installation address. Surveys service is a general first part of the URL that everybody needs, and then if you add the surveys on the end, followed by your token as a parameter, then as you'll see I've got here, you'll get a list of surveys, and this has a list of surveys in this installation. You see I have a title there. If you have a description, it will be there, and an author, and so on and so forth. So that's a pretty simple one, but that's one of the first ones that that are easiest to show. Moving on to look at the rest of the example, you then might want to add your participants to a survey, and once again we have a service for that allows you to specify the survey, and of course from the previous surveys get list, you will have a survey ID which you can then use to, along with a set of participants details, to add a participant into that survey. And then after that, you probably want to send them an email to tell them, to invite them to do the survey as well. And once again, from the previous survey, you will have an identifier. You can actually define which identifier you want to use, be it email or user ID. And you can use those in the survey participant send mail service to then send that that survey to somebody with a mail template. Of those of you who know EFS will know you can create mail templates, and you can get a mail template ID when you create a mail template within EFS, and you can put those all together and use our API to send a survey by email or by SMS, which works in exactly the same way if you have the SMS module enabled. Again, contact our support team if you're interested in that. But yeah, basically your participants, your end users, will then get your survey. Once all that's completed, you will then obviously want to get your results potentially, and obviously we have a lot of different ways in EFS to do that. But thinking specifically about the API methods, we have a survey, surveys get export service, which will allow you to get the data in the format that you desire. So I'm just going to show this last one. So here's the documentation. You've got a lot of different options here, whether you want it compressed, what type you want it in, what file format, and if you want to use template, the type and the template obviously refer to options you may have noticed in EFS when you do a manual export of a project, and so on and so forth. And because of the nature of this, obviously it's not as simple as a GET. You need to use a POST request for this particular service, and there is actually an example in the documentation to help you out. And I've taken a simplified version of the example and stuck it into Postman, which is one of the most popular API testing softwares that a lot of people use. And you can see here I've got a simplified form of that example with my survey ID and my options and my file format. And yeah, obviously the URL again, we just have the installation address, we have our service listed, and then surveys export plus a token there as well. And just calling that will return the data here, which is actually encrypted here, so just to protect the service. But yeah, hopefully that demonstrates a simple example of how you could go about using our APIs to work for you. The only other thing I would say is within EFS, if you have access to EFS, you do need to make sure you enable the services. So if you go into EFS and go into the options, if you have the service layer module enabled, you'll find this service layer page. And here you'll see a list of all the same services that are on the documentation. Of each of these, you need to activate them and assign rights in the same way you would for a lot of things in EFS. But whatever token or username password you're using, that user needs to have rights to that service. Plus, they also need rights to whatever you're using that service for. So, for example, if you're getting an export of data from a particular survey, that user needs to have access to that survey. That's pretty important. Likewise, if you want to add a panelist, for example, that user needs to have rights to the people section of EFS, like any other user. And I think that covers everything in my example. As ever, if there's anything that doesn't make sense or we can help you with, even if you don't think of your question now and you think of it later, please get in touch with our support team. Are well trained in helping with these types of queries. And if you have any ideas for services or API methods which are not currently available, please do get in touch with your relevant contact in Tivian, because again, that's something we can help with, something we can provide. We can add to these, and we can create new ones. So please talk to us if you have any ideas. And I think that's it from me.
Great, thank you, Alex. That's a great overview, and also a little bit of technical detail there for those, so you can understand how to put those together. We've already got a couple of questions in, but we've got plenty of time for more. So the first question, I think, in fact, it's two questions linked, two linked questions from Travis Santa. He's just asked whether or not there's a list of APIs available. So the good news is, Travis, that there is. And Alex is just bringing those up now. So, and again, at the end of, as part of the follow-up to this session, I will ensure that I share this link with you. But effectively, we've got the list of service layers up on the screen. And the second question, which is linked to this one, is, does it explain what they do?
Yes, so there's 2 pages really that we will send you through. There's a basic how-to that's a general idea of how our services how our services work and how to use them with each type of format here. It talks about a lot of things that I've been speaking about, how to structure the URL, what authentication to use, important parameters. It goes, and I think some of when you start to get into conditions, it can get a bit complicated, but it does explain in documentation how to set up your conditions. And the second page worth looking at is here. This is a list of services, and this list is forever being added to, and it gives you more details on some of the error codes. Plus, it's got a list of all the services split up by their type, and you can go in here, have a look at the different types, and expand it out and to get the full details, and plus examples of how to call it, and examples of the response for each service.
So hopefully that answers your question, Travis. And again, some of them probably go into a little bit more detail than others. And as Alex has said, if you've got access to this and you've got specific questions, reach out to the support team and they'll be able to get they'll probably be able to give you a really detailed response. Another question here just around when using these, or when using APIs, is there any kind of technical kind of infrastructure stuff that people need to do to make sure that they can access from their own networks, you know, from inside their own networks, or can they just run these themselves?
Yeah, getting a bit technical, but no, in most cases you should be fine. Obviously you want to check local things, local firewalls. If I know we've had problems in the past where people, particularly in certain offices, have very restrictive firewalls that can block this kind of thing. So that's certainly something to check. Aside from that, there are RESTful, generally available services. And naturally, if you come across any problems, please get in touch with the support team who will be able to help.
Okay. And one more question just coming in, and keep them coming in because we've got plenty of time today. This is from Ella. Is there an API that allows importing a questionnaire so to automate the programming of questionnaires in EFS?
No, there actually isn't. And the reason for that is, it's so complicated what you can do with an EFS survey. There's so much you can do. It would be quite a service that would be able to do everything. But what there is a service for copying a project. So what we have had people do is they've had maybe a project that they want to copy, or they've had a standard template that they want to repeat a lot, and there was a service that can copy an existing project. If you have a more specific requirement around this, we have done lots of other kind of projects like this. We have one client that they provide us a CSV file, and we turn that into a brand new created EFS project. It's a very complicated customization, I must say, but it's something we have done. So if you're interested in something like that, please do get in touch with your relevant Tivian contact, account manager, or the support team, failing all else, and they will be able to get you in touch with the right people, and we can have a look at those requirements in more detail.
Brilliant. Any final questions? If not, we'll bring it to a close a few minutes earlier than scheduled, but hopefully you've all got a lot out of today. As always, I'll share the recording and a little feedback survey off the back of this, so you can reach out to me as well if you've got any further questions on the APIs and you're interested in following up on these. So thanks very much again for joining. I'll say goodbye and I'll see you on the next one.
Yep. Thank you everybody for listening, and hopefully speak to you soon.